Skylar Haas. Skylar Haas. Okay. Hunter Hannah. Skylar Haas. Okay. All right. Hunter Hannah. Brittany Houston. Skylar Haas. Okay. All right. Hunter Hannah.
Okay. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's Rho Chi lecturer, Dr. Nicole Pilch. Dr. Pilch received her Doctor of Pharmacy degree from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and completed both a PGY1 Pharmacy Practice Residency and a PGY2 Critical Care Residency at the Medical University of South Carolina Medical Center. Following residency training, Dr. Pilch also completed a fellowship in transplantation, clinical research, and completed her thesis research for her master's in clinical research from the University of Cincinnati. She is currently a senior associate editor for AJHP and is on the transplant board of pharmaceutical specialties, aiding in the construction of the inaugural BPS exam. She has served on the American Transplant Society Pharmacist Community of Practice Executive Board, the United Network for Organ Sharing Membership and Professional Standards Committee, and in numerous other national leadership positions. She has served as a residency program director for the PGY1 Pharmacy Practice Residency and PGY2 Solid Organ Transplant Residency at MUSC. She remained at the bedside taking care of adult and pediatric solid organ transplant recipients for over 10 years. She has also served as a primary investigator for several clinical trials, both investigator-initiated and industry-supported, and published several articles surrounding immunosuppression practices, patient safety, and the role of the transplant pharmacist. She is currently an associate professor in the College of Pharmacy in the Department of Clinical Pharmacy and Outcome Sciences. She maintains a clinical practice on Mondays in the post-kidney transplant acute clinic, and most recently, Dr. Pilch assumed the role as a director of system quality assessment and performance improvement for MUHA, which provides oversight to all QAPI programs in the various MUHA divisions and oversees a multidisciplinary team of around 30 members. She takes learners most months out of the year and frequently can facilitate clinical research projects that yield abstract acceptance and presentations at national meetings. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Pilch to the podium.
Well, thank you all so much for this opportunity to speak with you tonight. It's such an honor to be here with you, especially with this prestigious group of students and faculty members. So I want to congratulate the new Rho Chi inductees. What a great journey it's probably been for you to get here to this ceremony. And, you know, as a member of Rho Chi, we heard all of this history about these great academic achievements, and that we know that you sustained that level of success as leaders in the pharmacy profession. You know, the initial creation of the society back in 1917 was to promote the advancement of pharmaceutical sciences through the encouragement and recognition of sound scholarship. These high standards and scholarly achievements are probably tough to do to be inducted in this prestigious society. So I'd like to get a show of hands from the group. Whose journey was easy getting to this? I don't see any hands. So it's that perception sometimes that we look around at our colleagues and mentors and think, boy, they make it look easy. It's funny how those pivotal moments in your academic life and your career happen when you don't even realize it. In the era of social media and that constant connection that we see with our colleagues and friends and family members, your ability to shape your own image can really be empowering, but also can be sort of self-defeating. So frequently I hear bios of my colleagues or other notable folks in the transplant community and think, wow, that's pretty awesome. Not thinking about what the journey it took to get there, to get all of those accolades on their biography. So we know a lot of people go online and portray the true, don't portray the true struggles that they're having, right? I'm not sure of how many folks go online and say, oh, I just failed that test, or the time's a charm on those board exams, right? Or my favorite is, your submission is not a priority for our journal. Or my other favorite one is, the author's scientific validity of the studies submitted cannot be overcome by revision or summarily rejecting, but you get 10% if you download the app, right? So I'd like to challenge you to savor those pivotal moments, good and bad, and I will submit to your hard work and perseverance to set that trajectory for your career. When I asked Lyric about this talk and what I should talk about, it was about my research experience, career as a pharmacist, and role at MUSC. And I'm going to do that, but I'm going to probably illustrate it with a few stories moving through. So I always used running as an outlet early in my scholarly career in pharmacy school, undergraduate, residency, and after 18 years of post-graduation from pharmacy school, a couple of years of residency and fellowship, won't talk about how many years ago that was. Training for a marathon really kind of culminates my journey. And so for the next 15 minutes, I'd like to take you on a marathon journey. Probably a lot like folks in this room. So the start of my marathon journey was really just to pick the race. The race I picked was a lot like all of you, becoming a pharmacist. In high school, I can remember one of my teachers asking me, what do I want to do when I grow up? And I looked around kind of surprised, but I knew I loved chemistry, didn't like a lot of fluids. So pharmacy I thought that was kind of the good thing to do. My friend's dad was a professor at the College of Pharmacy at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and we used to come home after school in high school, and he would be mixing stuff in his mortar and pestle. I really think it was guacamole a lot of the time. But that looked really exciting. So I figured, boy, that seems like a good thing to do. And college can't be that hard. I did pretty well in high school, took the couple of AP courses that were available, had no real problems there. So take you back to your first few days of undergrad. So can everybody kind of just remember back to those first couple of days when you're stepping your feet onto the ground of the campus for your first couple of college courses? Super exciting. It's like starting that marathon training. You're going to do it. You're going to conquer it. No problem, right? The pace is really easy with those first couple of runs on your marathon training, but then about week 5, you get to your first speed work session. That was like my first failure in college. So I studied for exams and did pretty well. I can remember vividly back to my zoology 101 exam though. I believe it was on plant biology. I think it was about trees. And I recall getting the exam score back and completely failing. Not even just close, not with any of the extra points that we got back for questions. All it failed. I was devastated, went to the course coordinator, and he said, kind of asked me about my study habits and this, that, and the other. And then he said, so what do you want to do with your life? And I said, well, I'm going to be a pharmacist. And he said, not sure about that. It's not in the cards for you. You'll never get into pharmacy school. I'm pretty sure I walked out of that office pretty defeated and thought, geez, he might be right. But later in the day, as most of us do, we turn to a parent. So I turned to my dad. And he said, don't let it defeat you. You have to fail to appreciate succeeding. Boy, was he right. And even through that speed session and that failure, I knew I had to press on with that training, mainly because I needed to get through undergrad without loans. So if I skipped that class, I'd be back a year. So I had to press through. So I did. And it was not the first or last time that you take those risks to get to that next step. And remember, never let anybody tell you that you don't have the ability to do it. So make sure you maintain that grit as you go through your career. So don't forget the speed work. It works. It wakes up those fast twitch muscle fibers. And it's hard while you're doing it, but it's an investment that takes you further faster. So the next thing that comes to mind with marathon training for me is that inevitable hill work. So usually you do 400s or 800 meters, time multiple repetitions, and the hill work is supposed to build strength, resilience, and master form. My first hill work came with just probably as many of you are dealing with right now, the residency match. I know that's a sore subject for some folks in the anticipation, but it's an exciting time. Keep that in mind. I was very fortunate with the match that I matched here for PGY1 residency. PGY2 was not the same story though. There were a couple of folks in my residency class at the time, and there were only 2 critical care spots, and that was not at the time that we had the residency match. So this was online. Or excuse me, it was not online. And it was kind of like what the scramble is for residency match. And so the PGY2 director called me the night before I was getting ready to board a plane to go to Chicago for another PGY2 residency interview. And at that time, I had to sit there and weigh the pros and cons of whether I stay here at MUSC and get started with my next year of residency or press my luck and try for another program. Fortunately, I think I made the right choice, staying here at MUSC. I thought my hill work was done early in my career. Awesome. That's great. Jump over one hill, no big deal. But by the time that PGY2 residency was wrapping up, the job market was pretty poor for critical care residents. So there was not a lot of jobs out there. So I figured, well, why don't we just go ahead and do some fellowship? I like clinical research. Might as well try doing some additional training there. But the marathon training was getting pretty extensive. And by the time I was 3 years postgraduate from pharmacy school, the marathon training was getting extensive, and I was frankly getting ready for a paycheck. and I needed to start paying off those student loans. So an opportunity here at MUSC opened up, and I was able to complete my fellowship early and was getting pretty excited to come back to MUSC as an ambulatory transplant clinical specialist. At the time, the positions were split. There was an inpatient role and an outpatient role, and there was a lot of turnover. Several folks had come and gone and left these positions. And just as I was closing on my house, I happened to be in Boston for a meeting. I was out to lunch with my fellowship director, and she turned to me and she said, "Hey, I can't believe so-and-so is leaving MUSC." I hadn't heard that the colleague that I was coming to be paired with was actually resigned from MUSC as I was closing on my house. I had a proctor here in Charleston closing on my house. So a bit of a panic set in. But then I thought, why do folks keep leaving this position? How can we get people to stay? And so I was fortunate enough to call on a colleague, Dave Tabor, who was back from a stint at Wingate University and the clinical manager at Trident, and said, "Hey, why don't you come back to MUSC and let's rework the whole position. Let's do inpatient and outpatient, create a variety so that folks stay in these positions longer." No one's banished to one side or the other. Unfortunately, he agreed. And in 2006, he came back to MUSC 2 months after me. So the Hill work paid off. The extra training took longer, but we were able to structure the model and we have very little turnover. And it's expanded from 2 PharmDs, that was Dave and myself, to 4 plus 2 residents. And that's not including Dave or myself today. So remember your Hill work. Oftentimes it's really hard, needs to be repeated. And the end result to get what you want, but training for the race will inevitably take twists and turns that you don't anticipate. So one other example here with training is you'll inevitably have poor training days, right? Bad weather. You don't feel like completing that run, or the training can sometimes jump up and hit you in the knees. Specifically, the Charleston cracks downtown are challenging. I have several cracks in my knees. But you have to have that resilience to get back up. And I fortunately had many of those during undergrad, pharmacy school, and postgraduate training. That didn't make my plan go the right way or made me hit the ground a couple of times. Failing in your career is just a bad weather day and marathon training. Remember that. The good thing about failing early is that you know how to move on. You can get through those failures if you take the right perspective. And one event for me stands out. It includes the willingness to fail. I'd always liked doing clinical research and looking for answers to questions about transplant patients. My focus has always been safety, medication adherence, and disparities in our transplant population. And fortunately, I was able to work with a multidisciplinary team for many years with lots of research initiatives. So I recall one lonely night when the chairman of surgery called me and asked me if I'd be interested in taking the director of quality role for transplant. I've been an RPD, for a number of years at that point. I had never had direct reports. I'd been a transplant clinical specialist for about 10 years at that point, and the role had gotten pretty routine. So I thought, shoot, why not go ahead and do that? No formal training in quality and safety. I was sleep deprived from my second child, so I think that played into it a little bit. And I thought, shoot, we'll do that, no problem. So I entered this role. At that point, I had 4 direct reports and 2 empty positions. And within the first 4 months of taking that position, all but 1 individual resigned. So I was able to recruit, but the benefit of that is I was able to recruit folks to my team that I needed with specific skills. Also, in addition to those operational issues, several of our programs were in some regulatory, had some regulatory opportunities. We had one program that needed to submit a response within 90 days of me entering the role, and we had 40 event reviews to do. And so I thought, shoot, I've been a pharmacist with all these folks. Let's pull them into a room, get through these event reviews, no problem. But pulling the team together for these case reviews was less than collegial. I went from their friendly, helpful pharmacist to the cop on the corner. Folks that I worked with for years, I felt like turned on me like the sky opening up, on a long run, you're 3 miles from the house, it's downpouring. I became so distracted with rebuilding relationships with all these folks and working through the issues that became really consuming. And I can remember a couple of instances vividly. At one point, I was in Rutledge Tower Garage working through some relationship issues. I didn't notice that a gentleman was backing out as I was going up, crushed my car like a tin can. I think my husband said it looked like a Sprite can. And then the second time was when I ran a red light between Lowe's and Home Depot driving my other child to daycare. That was a low month. The self-doubt can creep in, can be all-consuming, but then you have those fighting moments that you take stock in. And for me, that moment for training for the race, despite the bad weather, you just have to push through because you know you should and you can. And you capture those moments so you can have those emotions and take them to the bank when you need to pull things out to help you out. And in that case, what really brought perspective to me was going to clinic. I was able to see a few patients, really connect with purpose. Specifically, one patient stands out in my mind, got a kidney transplant, was on dialysis for several years, was so thankful for their organ and the gift from the donor that I thought, boy, this is worth fighting for. So the connect to purpose helps you take the risks and helps you succeed and be resilient. And also have that perseverance to finish the workout because you have to do it in the rain because it might rain on race day. Finally, the long run. Long runs in marathon preparation go from 16 to 24 miles, depending on what blog or magazine or things you subscribe to. They take a lot of prep work, diet, training, hydration, gear, lots of gear. You can always have these perfect intentions, but sometimes you have a bad day in those runs. That's why there's usually about 4 of those in every training cycle, right? So if you have a couple bad ones, you have a couple good ones. These runs most often for me make me pretty humble. You need every person on your team and the care team essential to taking care of the patient, from the person cleaning the room to the surgeon performing the operation. Everybody matters and can help. So be humble. Back in residency, I can recall being out with the PGY2s. Early in residency, a couple of them were from Wisconsin and graduated the year before me. And they gave me a piece of advice. They said, treat Gwen like gold. I didn't know who Gwen was at the time, but Gwen was the administrative assistant for the residency program. And if you were kind, and if you kept her in the loop, she would absolutely take care of you. That's pretty consistent with how we should treat everybody, right? Time and time again, we see every role and every person matters. So make sure you take the time and get to know everybody on your long run. You'll most often cross paths and need help, and genuinely be better by not putting your position above somebody else. When you're on rotations, follow the chain of command. Make sure you make the resident and intern look good. Make sure you make your fellow students look good. Tell them what you think, set them up for success. And the nurse at the bedside, along with the patient, are the people who know the patient the best. So make sure that you're approachable. And if you seem approachable, then you'll get a lot more information and a lot more impact from your recommendations. But sometimes you also have to swallow your pride on the long run and fall on your sword. So I recall an event where a leader and I were disagreeing on the next steps of a regulatory event. The leader stood across the table and shook his hand in my face and said, "You're not on my team." Several other folks in the room came up to me afterwards and said, you know, that was uncalled for, or consoled me. And I could have given up and dug my heels in. And I had to run a lot of miles, I will say, to put myself in that person's shoes and to realize what the next step was. So I asked that person to go for coffee with some trepidation. And I had to apologize and say, I was on their team and I wanted to make it right. It was pretty hard, challenging. You could, dig your heels in, skip that long run, and say the person was wrong, but not take the next step to push forward. But you have to do it if you want to get to the next level. So I'm happy to say that that relationship is great today. And it took some very long runs and some pride swallowing to get there, but it was the path of least resistance. So remember to be humble and sometimes follow on your sword. So after picking your race and doing your speed work and your hills and your long run, you do have to have a bit of luck. Race day happens anytime, right? You're up for the challenge. Each race is inherently a bit of luck. The weather, hopefully it's around 50 degrees, low humidity, gentle breeze at your back, both directions, no rain, but also in races and in your career, luck favors the prepared. I'm sure you've all heard that from time to time. I found that taking on several projects and roles builds that capital investment in your luck bank, right? Had several examples of just really being lucky. During my fellowship, I was, kind of going to my program director thinking, I got to publish. And she said, okay, fine, here, have this. I was handed an opportunity to write about kidney transplantation in high-risk patients. So she handed that project to me. Well, it's kind of a nebulous topic. It's pretty broad, So I took the first few months of my fellowship and constructed this article and tried to figure out what does it mean for high-risk kidney transplantation. And it was in the Journal of Drugs. I figured, not great impact factor, not a great paper, but good experience. But it did lead to the transplant nursing community reaching out for me to speak at their national conference and work on a consensus paper. And now I'm still in touch with them. Also, Dave Taver and I had been working with the transplant team to reduce length of stay and readmissions, multiple initiatives, and we pulled some data together sort of at the last minute. I can admit now, several years later, we were able to win the ASHP Patient Safety Award. Just as training and putting the miles in for a long run often help you create research projects or write papers, it gets easier as you go. The challenges you take and the opportunities will give you that value to be a better pharmacist, team member, and person in general. So make sure you learn from your colleagues. Know that you can't compare. Know that nobody's walked in your shoes and you haven't walked in theirs. But always remember, luck favors the prepared. So I hope that when you train for your career race, that you consider the speed work, the hills, the long runs, and the race day as a challenge and the inspiration. Just because you didn't reach your goal during that last race doesn't mean you shouldn't get up and train for the next one. So thank you and congratulations to the newest members of Rho Chi.
Hey, thank you, Dr. Pilch. Thank you for sharing with us and taking us on a marathon journey throughout your career, reminding us to be resilient and at the same time to stay humble throughout our journey. I would like to I would like to give you this gift as a token of our appreciation. I would now like to invite Dr. Worrell and Dr. Hall to the podium for the award ceremony.
Thank you, Lyric. So I'd like to begin by recognizing our 2020-2021 Alpha Iota Chapter Executive Committee. So if you'll come forward when I call your name, please. Lyric, sorry, you're coming right back. Lyric Chaplin, our president. Lynn Hazard, our vice president. Kathy Lee, our secretary. Bethany Burnett, our treasurer. And Elena Gaspar, our historian. You go ahead and hand them out. So it's really been a pleasure working with this group of students this year. I'd like to briefly highlight just some of the accomplishments of the chapter because they've done just a really wonderful job. At the beginning of the fall semester, we started by hosting a recognition luncheon for the top 30% of the P2 class, just in recognition of their academic performance during the first year and kind of as the encouragement to start that pharmacotherapy series and continue to excel in their academics. We also did a stress management workshop and a test taking workshop during the fall semester. And we also hosted a school supply drive that sent a whole bunch of different supplies to a couple of different elementary schools here in Charleston. That was a big success. This semester, actually this was in the fall semester as well. We implemented the chapter project proposal that we won a national award for grant for last year, which was our naloxone training program. Landon was a person who got that proposal through the national office and awarded. And we had about 100 pharmacists and students from all the different colleges here on campus attend that training. And we used that grant money to buy naloxone kits, and we donated those to 180 Place. So that was a really great effort. We've had lots of people speak at our meetings this year, including many of our faculty members. One of the faculty members, Dr. Walt Huber, we nominated for the National Rho Chi Honor Roll, and he actually just today received his letter, and we'll be getting a certificate for that. And we also nominated Dr. Jean Nappy for the Rho Chi Lecture Award as well, and we'll be hearing about that in May. So we have our fingers crossed that she'll be selected for that. And I think the last thing I just wanted to mention is, I think between Landon's work and Lyric's work as well, we were recognized as one of the most improved chapters this year in the country. We didn't win the overall award, but we were in the top finalists for that. And I have a gut feeling with everything you guys have been doing, we got a pretty good shot for chapter of the year this year. So that's really saying something. And again, I just really appreciate all of your all's work over the past 2 years. You've really done a lot for the chapter and for the students here. So thank you so much. So you can probably see they are getting an RX Prep NAPLEX review book as a token of our appreciation for their service this year. Next, I'd like to recognize the chairs of our 3 committees. And I think 2 out of 3 of them are here with us this evening. If you guys would come up. Amari Marshall could not be here tonight, but Daniel Greco and Elena Gaspar, if you guys would come up. So Amari has served as our small group supplemental instruction coordinator. She works really closely with the Center for Academic Excellence to ensure that we have enough small group SI leaders for students who need some extra help outside of the classroom. Danielle served as our large group, and they're going to get that one. Danielle served as our large group supplemental instruction coordinator. So these are like big group sessions for students that are in the pharmacotherapy series, and I know the P2 students greatly appreciate your all's efforts on that front. We do have a lot of students, some of which are in the audience tonight, who have really helped out a lot with those large group SI sessions. And if you're here, I'd just like you to stand and be recognized for your effort with that. They include Mallory Bradbury, McCall Cannon, Amelia Furbish, Elena Graspar, Daniel Greco, Lynn Hazard, Landon Johnson, Kathy Lee, Anthony Rodriguez, Madison Salem, Drew Sauk, Sarah Taylor, and Sarah Wyatt. So these are all members that have helped out with the large group supplemental instruction. Thank you all so much for your service. And then finally, Eleni served as our liaison for Reading Partners, which is one of our community outreach efforts. It's a children's literacy organization. And although the pandemic kind of put a damper on our efforts with Reading Partners this year, she got together a big book drive and took a whole heck of a lot of books over to them. And I think they're organizing now to kind of stuff book bags and get those books out to the kids. So we really appreciate your efforts with that as well. So each of our chairs are getting, I love how they call this a handbook. Do you see how big this thing has gotten? This is the lexicon book, handbook. So each one of them are getting those as a token of our appreciation. Thank you guys so much for everything you did this year. And next, I'm going to recognize the Rho Chi members who served as small group supplemental instructors this year. So these are students who take small groups of students. They meet with them and on an average of 3 hours a week, in addition to prep time, to do those sessions. So it is quite time intensive. And they do it throughout the course of the semester, working through the CAE. So I'd like to recognize the students who have served in that capacity. If you guys would please come up on stage when I call your name if you're here this evening. Nicole Arroyo, Thomas Benton, Amelia Furbish, Caitlin Diosis, Elena Gaspar, Lynn Hazard, and Rushan Lee. And each of you are also getting a copy of this very small drug information book. And again, really appreciate your all's work on the small group supplemental instruction. We know that's a lot of work, a big time commitment, and really appreciate it. All right, thank you guys. Oh, actually, I have a different one. Sorry, Pat Wooster picked out one specifically for you. So I've got it in the back. I didn't know you were coming. I'll get it to you right afterward. Okay. All right, thank you guys so much. And I'd just like to recognize Jay Mullis from AstraZeneca. He is the person we get these book donations from every year. So we really appreciate his support in terms of recognizing our students. He was very generous this year. Every student member of Rho Chi also got a digital copy of the Stanford Guide this year. So every P3 and P4 received that. And that also came from AstraZeneca. So finally, our fourth years. For those of you who are here this evening, I hope that we have more because we are doing this in March after all the residency stuff, but we only have 3 of you guys here tonight, but we want you to come up and be recognized. I'm going to go ahead and read off the whole list, but when I call your name, please come forward to receive your Rho Chi cords. Rashana Blackwood, Brian Blau, Sheridan Boyd, Mallory Bradbury, McCall Cannon, Hannah Coker, Jessica Crane, Brittany Cunningham, Bailey Bass Hammond, Landon Johnson is here. Karen Lee is here as well. Tung Wen, Jacob Brennenbaum, Anthony Rodriguez, Madison Salem, Carly Sis, I believe, is here, yes, and Ryan Smiley. So these are 3 of our graduating students that are in Rho Chi. And again, we just want to thank you guys for everything you've done for the chapter and the college since you've been here. We wish you luck as you move on and start your careers. So again, thank you so much. And this concludes our initiation and awards program this evening. Thanks everyone for joining us. Thank you everyone on live stream, and we apologize for some sound issues initially, but hopefully I think we got that all resolved. There are some cookies in the back if you guys want to grab those on your way out. We couldn't do a banquet, but at least we have some cookies for you. They're in the back. And for those of you who were selected to pick up some of the other books that you guys know about, if you know what I'm talking about, they are in the back, I think out in the lobby as well. So you guys can get together out there to pick those up. So congratulations, new initiates, and thanks again for everyone that made everything a success this year. Have a great evening. That didn't take very long at all, did it? Great, can you believe? How big these are?
I mean, that was is that the old thing we used to
That we used to
carry in
carry,
our
yeah,
pocket?
we used to keep it in our pocket.